So I just wanted to cover some topics that I personally found difficult. Gene expression can be mild or severe. It's dynamic. It's not an on and off thing. So now let's talk about penetrance. Penetrance. Now that we know what gene expression is, penetrance is can be confused with gene expression, but it's very very different. So essentially, penetrance is the chance for someone to develop the disease, and that is its definition. However, it's more complicated than that. So let's say you actually are producing the proteins and you have the gene expression, so you have this defected gene. Hence, you technically should have the severity of the disease. What can end up happening is that, kind of with this example here, let's say you have 80% expression of a special gene, right? And what this gene is doing is it's making the hair on your arms a little thinner. You can have 80% gene expression. However, your penetrance can be zero. So despite you expressing this gene and having the defect, you actually will not exhibit it at all phenotypically. So despite having the gene that's going to reduce the hair on your arm, you're actually not even reducing the hair on your arm, at least genetically and also physically. There is no change. So penetrance is a chance that someone will develop the disease. However, please understand that you can still have gene expression be affected. You can still have mutations and as such, right? So there are two types of penetrance. One is complete penetrance, which is that, let's extrapolate this now to a population where if we know that 50% of individuals are going to have this disease, out of those 50% of people, how many of those people are actually expressing the disease and showing it? So complete penetrance is where all individuals carrying the mutation, show that they have the mutation, so they exhibit it phenotypically, versus incomplete penetrance is that where we see, and this usually is the case, is that not all individuals with the mutation necessarily show the trait, right? So I like to think of penetrance as being phenotypical, expression as genotypical. Yes, this is wrong, but it's just an analogy. And then we're going to have anticipation. So this is where as each new generation is being born, the disease expression is increasing. And the long story short version of this is basically you can have these looping disease mechanisms where as more and more cells replicate, this loop ends up getting bigger and bigger, which can end up causing higher disease expression and higher gene expression of these, mutated genes. And the GLS has a specific example for this that is kind of just a nice to know, but it helps clarify this concept. Knutson's two-hit hypothesis is actually very simple. I don't know why it confused me, but essentially all it is that you're going to get one bad trait, which is going to be passed down from your mom or your dad or a mix of both. And then you're going to develop a second one on your own. And the reason why the Knutson's two-hit hypothesis was proposed is because they were essentially just trying to figure out, well, how can you get two mutations on two alleles when you're only inheriting one bad allele? So I think that's what it's explaining. I could be wrong, but that's my interpretation. And then why do we do presynaptic testing? Again, it's just from Luca's notes, which is if treatment is available for any manifestation of a disorder, early diagnosis is reasonable in children. Maybe we can prolong life or prolong quality of life. Now, in terms of Luca's notes, I wanted to cover one more thing, which is a penetrance comparison. So what this is saying is that I have my familial inheritance, which is from the parents, right? And sporadic is basically it's just coming out of its own. It's just making, it could be like a random base substitution or whatever it may be. So it's not really in the parents. And again, this is the purpose of the pedigree. You can kind of figure these things out. And it also connects into penetrance, because essentially what this is saying is that 100% of the people who have achondroplasia or hypochondroplasia, 100% of them who inherit it from their parents and express this mutated gene, they also are going to express phenotypically achondroplasia, right? So they're going to have this FGFR3 gene be affected, and they're also going to show limited bone formation. And so are the people who are just going to randomly have that gene mutation. Because let's say the penetrance was 50%. So maybe the people who have a sporadic mutation, only half of them or none of them show the expression of the gene, but they themselves have the FGFR3 gene in them. So their bones are fine, for example, their signaling for growth is normal. Versus people who who have familial inheritance, or they're getting it from their parents, they may have 100% penetrance, which means that if they get it from their parents, they're going to have the mutation in the FGFR3, and they're going to have limited bone formation. Notice that regardless of what penetrance was, they're both going to have the FGFR3 mutation. Hopefully that should explain that. Again, there's not much to explain. You just need to know all of this, know all of these. But most of them are like pretty common sense. So like for retinoblastoma, retinal, so likely something to do with the eye. Generic error, it's going to be a loss of function in a tumor suppressor gene. So you're going to have a tumor in the, I guess, somewhere in the eye. You know the inheritance pattern, and then just some key facts. There really isn't that much. And telltale signs, so memorize this, understand what it looks like. So they're going to have white pupils, likely some type of corneal opacity, so they're not going to have, I guess, vision or blurred vision in that eye. What's the reason for this? Fetal development, where the retinoblasts are rapidly dividing. Most cells that have words that have the ending blast are some type of precursor cell, so likely they're not having some macular development. That would be honestly a really good answer. For a short answer, here's an explanation of Knudson's two-head hypothesis and why it's relevant. So specific to retinoblastoma, essentially, let's see, it's very likely that you're only going to be inheriting one allele, and then you're going to have a mutation in the other. That's what's characteristic of this disease. And so just go over it. There's neurofibromatosis, and there's a couple more. There's 4 for this week. It's really not that bad. You have to go over it. Again, it's not going to come like right away. Likely just writing it out multiple times, going through questions, showing up for students in person is very helpful, and I would recommend it.